Hey everyone, we'll wait a few seconds to see if people join in. We'll give everyone some time to join the stream today. Um, so just bear with me for a little moment and we'll get started. For those of you who are here already and maybe don't know me because I've been missing a couple streams for the last few weeks, I'm Chris. I'm the Canadian product specialist for everything Yamaha Line 6 and Ampeg in Canada. Um, like I was saying, maybe you haven't seen me in a while. I was actually doing some dealer promo for Catalyst for the last 5 to 6 weeks. So it's mainly been Nick, Tony, and Ross holding it down as they usually do. So glad to be back with you guys. And today we'll be mostly talking about Catalyst, but I feel like the topic I'm going to be talking about today also pertains to Helix owners, Podgo, because it's pretty fast, and I guess the effects that we're going to be talking about today can be found in those other devices as well. So even though I'm going to be using Catalyst today, this will pertain to pretty much everybody that is using a Line 6 multi-effect of some sort. So the topic for today will be mainly about pitch shift, octave effects, stuff like that. The ones that can be found in Catalyst, but of course it may expand to a lot of other devices. So yeah, we'll get started. We'll dial in some tones. I'll give you some examples. I've even made a bit of content to give more emphasis on the example itself. So yeah, we'll get started here. Let me just switch screens to Catalyst Edit, like so. If at any point of the stream you feel like I should raise the guitar's volume or speak louder even, just feel free to let me know in the comments. I did do a quick level balance before starting everything, so it should be... So everything should be good on that side. So yeah, today we'll be talking about octave effects, pitch shift, octave fuzz, and all that kind of goodness. We'll get started with the first one that's actually found in Catalyst, which is the Boctaver effect, the bass octaver, as is the full name, which is a monophonic pitch shifter, which means that it will only allow a certain amount of notes to track, if that makes any sense. You can do single note licks, stuff like that with ease, but if you start introducing chords with too many notes at a time or something like that, it'll start to create some digital artifacts. So I'll give you a quick example of that here. I'm gonna turn this effect on. You'll see now it's set to post. We'll set it to pre-after, and I'll explain the difference as well. So here's the Octaver. Well, here's the clean sound first. And let's turn that octave effect on. Then, so as you could hear, it was fine for anything that involved only single notes. So if I even play slowly, but if I start introducing some chords, you'll start to hear kind of a bit of a wobbliness, kind of almost of a ring mod-ish kind of sound. So let's try to introduce some chords. Just a single power chord should be fine, but when you have more than like 3 notes in your chord, it'll start to be weird. So. So it wasn't that bad because I was still just doing a major chord. Let's try to add some stuff. Now you probably heard those digital artifacts a bit better. So yeah, that's because the octave itself is what we call monophonic. Then now it's set to post. Usually it's not really a standard, but it's a matter of preference because it will give different sounds. But usually with pitch-based effects, you want to have them pre-distortion, preamp, because it will help with the tracking. So you may have a better chance of not having as many digital artifacts. So let's just give it a try. And also it makes for a kind of a cleaner octave sound, if that makes sense. I'll play some stuff again in post and then switch to pre right away so you can hear the difference. But yeah, you'll hear that the octave down blends a bit better and it's a bit more present. So let's just play in post. Let's switch that to pre. Post again. Don't know how well it translates over on the stream, but I feel like the octave set to pre is a bit more cleaner sounding and much more present in the overall mix of the dry signal and the effect itself. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why you may want to have it set to pre rather than post. Blends a bit better and tracks a bit better as well. So let's try even some chords with that. So you got a bit of a rumble, but nothing crazy digital like we had in post. So yeah, that's two of the main reasons why you want to have it set to pre. Then we'll switch to what we call a polyphonic octaver or pitch shifter in that sense. So we'll switch from bass octaver here to the pitch shift section. Now to have it act like an octaver like we just used now, you want to have it set to -12 here. That's going to be a full octave below. And you want to have the mix set to maybe 50%. That's a matter of preference, so your mileage may vary. If you want to exaggerate that effect, set it to higher values. But if you want to have it a bit more tame and a bit more behind your guitar in a way, set it to like 35 and it'll make sense. Now, the difference with polyphonic and monophonic is that the polyphonic will allow for way more notes to track at the same time. So chords will sound cleaner as well. You won't get as many chances of having digital artifacts as well. So let's give that a quick try, and then I'll switch from pre to post again so we can hear the difference in this distortion and everything. So that's polyphonic pitch shifter set to 1 octave down, 50% mix. So don't know once again how well it translated over on the stream, but way cleaner when doing chords. It just basically feels like you also have another guitar playing everything you're playing, but just an octave down. So really useful to have a polyphonic pitch shifter in your arsenal, especially if you like that kind of fuzzed out and octave down kind of tone. Well, we're not using fuzz at the moment, but I'll give some examples later. But yeah, it's a really killer combination if you want to add a bit of punch to a section of a song, or just when playing live, you want to add a bit of depth if you're the only guitar in the mix, stuff like that. Because it's not really taking away from the bass EQ spectrum, if that makes sense, because even though it's an octave down like a bass would be, you're still using those same frequencies that you have for guitar. And in most cases, if you're going through an amp like today for myself or my Catalyst, you're still using a guitar speaker, so it's still not able to reproduce those super low frequencies you would get with a bass. So it doesn't really challenge the bass in the mix too much. We got Duke here saying hi from New Zealand. I'm willing to bet it's pretty late or early, depending on what you want to call it up there, but cheers. Um, yeah, so that's the polyphonic pitch shifter. Once again, if we set it to post, the effect itself will start to be distorted a bit more. So I'll switch from pre to post right here. Post. See, it started to kind of lose track at the end if you try to do something a bit fast, because if the effect itself is distorted, the tracking kind of becomes distorted as well, if that makes any sense. So once again, that's another reason why you want to have it set to pre, because everything stays together a bit more, if that makes any sense. Then we'll switch to something else. I got other effects here that I want to talk about. One being the Octave Fuzz. So we got an Octave Fuzz here with the Tyke Octave Fuzz. The main difference between an Octave Fuzz and using distortion with an octaver, for example, even though it almost sounds kind of the same, is that a fuzz octave first is mainly monophonic from what I've been seeing, and it doesn't really have that extra low octave in the background. Usually it's more when you play higher up in the registry here, and it's more of an octave up kind of thing, kind of blooming with your notes, if that makes any sense. Think Jimmy, for example. So if I play something in the lower registry, you basically will only hear a fuzz. Let's dial in some fuzz here. I'll give you that example. See, and when we started doing triads or any kind of chord situation, then once again the tracking of the effect itself started to create some digital artifacts and kind of a ring mod-ish kind of tone. So that's another way to know if you got a monophonic or polyphonic octave effect when playing. So if I go in the higher registry of the neck and switch to the neck pickup, which I'll do in the middle of playing, you'll hear that there's kind of an octave up coming through. So I'll start on the bridge pickup, which you won't hear the effect as much, and then I'll switch to the neck and just sustain the notes a bit more, and then you'll hear that +1 octave come through. So bridge pickup here. Then neck. See, when trying to sustain the notes, you could hear that extra high note come through. So it's not feedback, it's really just the octave portion of the fuzz reacting to the playing, and that's something with octave fuzzes that mainly happen in the higher registry of the neck. So think maybe 10th fret up, and neck pickup is where you get the best reaction, if that makes any sense, from the octave fuzz. So that's another kind of octave-ish effect that is really cool. Now the main difference between that and distortion with an octaver, like I was saying, is just that you don't have control over the choice of which octave you want to come through, and then it doesn't happen on every fret on the neck, right? We only were able to get that extra octave in the higher registry, whereas if you set a distortion with an octaver, it'll do the octave effect no matter where you're playing on the neck. We got Duke asking a question here. Does the amount of octave change with less gain? Well, to be honest, since I'm using that fuzz with an already distorted preset, because we had a bit of gain going on from the amp itself, it might not make as much of a difference, but typically the lower the gain, the less, yeah, the more sensible the octave effect will be, but it might not show up as much. I'll give you an example, because it will be better than words. So let's dial it down here. Well, I'll give you an example at the setting I was playing on, and then I'll dial it down. Then let's go to 15%. Then back to 65. See that the octave kind of stayed similar, but the amount of fuzz really made the difference. So even though it's dialed down in terms of fuzz, you can still get that octave effect to come through. So if fuzz is not your thing, it's also a cool way to introduce all kinds of octave effects to your sound without distorting too much, if that makes any sense. Then another effect from the catalyst effects section here that I think is kind of cool and still related to pitch and octave and all that good stuff. Especially if you're playing single note runs, or even on a bass, if you want to do some chords but don't necessarily have the stretch in your fingers and stuff like that, that's a cool cheat to have here. You get the pitch harmony, which is a polyphonic pitch shifter as well, and then you set it to +7 here. And what this will do is actually, well, if you play an A, for example, it'll play the next E. So as if you were playing a power chord, right? So just a quick example, I'll turn it off first, just play an A on the first, on the low E string. And turn that on. What I like to do with that effect is usually turn it down just a bit, because it can sound fake real quick. So if you dial it down just a little bit, like so, maybe a bit more even. It kind of sounds like you're playing a power chord right now. So if you want to, record something and have the impression of playing power chords real fast, or if you're on a bass and you want to add that extra rumble and growl to your sound, that's a cool trick to have. But yeah, I'll give you a quick riff example here of only single notes, but since the effect is on, it'll feel like I'm playing power chord. And what's cool also is that it introduces a lot of kind of almost 12 stringy kind of tones if you play notes in the higher registry. So I'll just do an A here, an E. Kind of a cool way to add some effects to a track if you're into those kind of things. Something that's always good to know if you need to maybe even just inspire to yourself to play something different, because since you're making chords on every single note you're playing, it might affect the way you play, and then in return it might even affect the way you think when playing, right? So it could even inspire you to create something else. We got another question here from Jim saying, a little off topic, but can you tell me if the cab models should be on or off when playing only through the amp? Good question, Jim. So actually, the cab sim, which you can see here, if you see my pointer on the stream here, only affects the outputs in the back. So basically your XLR output, your USB out, and your phones out. It won't, the changes made to that section won't affect the sound that's coming out of the Catalyst speaker, the physical speaker itself. So I hope that answers your question, Jim. But yeah, basically just changing anything in that section won't affect anything if you just play with the amp itself. Right on. So let's go in one other effect portion of the pitch-based effects here, which is kind of a weirder one for sure. So we've also added a kind of a synthy kind of effect to Catalyst, which once again is very inspiring in some ways, if you like to think of it that way, because it really forces you to play different, because the synth effect in Catalyst is kind of a mix of compression and octave effects, kind of stuff like that. So with the attack knob here, you can really change the way the effect responds to your pick attack and stuff like that. So I'll give you an example with that attack setting set still to this value, but you'll hear kind of a latency almost and huge compression, which kind of really forces you to play differently. So. Now, if you want to have it react more like a guitar, you can just basically turn that attack knob all the way down, and there still will be a little latency, but really almost nothing in comparison to what we just experienced right now. So now if we make some adjustments here, so basically I'll turn the speed down because it's kind of a warbly kind of effect. So I'll put it to full value so you can, well, to a high value so you can hear what it does. So it's your modulation speed basically. Then I'll set the pitch here to 0 because it'll be kind of an octave down-ish kind of effect, and your frequency here is basically your tone. So I'll set it to a lower value so it makes more sense with the lower octave. So. Then it tracks well enough with chords if you do normal, just major, minor chords. If you start to introduce too many notes, once again, kind of like the monophonic octaver, it will start to get in that ring mod-ish territory. So just... See, there's almost nothing coming through rather than just maybe... At least when doing normal chords, you can kind of hear the root note of it all. So that's way better than when trying to add too much. Then you can always play with that mix knob here if you want to have a combination of your guitar and that synth. Set it even lower for more stability, if that makes any sense. Like Duke was saying here, when I set the attack down, kind of stabilizes the whole effect. So now you'll get way more guitar through, and it'll make more sense from a guitar player's perspective. It almost kind of becomes a fuzz in that sense when it's set to this low of a value. So once again, it could be a cool effect to have in your arsenal if you want to have something that really stands out or is really different from what you're used to playing, it can really change perspective and maybe even inspire new things, like I was saying earlier. Um, the main use for those effects that I showed today is basically, well, I personally have two uses for octave effects. Usually, when I have a fuzz going on, I tend to prefer my fuzz with a bit more mids, and by setting a fuzz that way, usually you kind of lose a lot of the bass. So having that octave effect kind of restores your low end, um, while keeping that mid forward tone that you dialed in from your fuzz itself, right? So it makes kind of uh, it becomes the best of both worlds to have the octave effect with your fuzz if you lost a lot of the bass with the fuzz EQ, right? And then another usage for me is while recording, if you set your octave effect to a higher mix value, but just record a separate track, it adds a lot of depth to a riff, especially if you only have one guitar part and it's single notes and you have kind of a thinner kind of tone. It really gives a lot of punch to your track. So I actually made a little track for today, which I will show you in a second. We actually got a question from AZDH here. If you can get the purple haze solo sound from that. Well, with the Octave Fuzz, so the Tyke Octavia in the for Catalyst, you can definitely get in that territory, right? So right? So you can definitely get in that territory for sure. So yeah, like I was saying, let me just switch screens here. I'll explain it to you before switching to that screen because my mic will get muted. But yeah, I've made a little track. The first section is going to be just guitar, bass, drums. It's nothing crazy. There's no panning, there's no mix, there's no extra effects. It was just for the sake of showing the effect itself. So the first section is guitar, bass, drums, and then it will come back. There's going to be a full bar of silence, and then it will come back, but it'll be guitar, octave guitar, bass, drums. You'll hear, I hope it'll translate well in the stream, but you should be able to hear a lot more punch in the track. Let me just switch screens. So once again, my mic will be muted, but yeah, let's give that a listen. Right, so I hope that the effect translated through the stream, but yeah, the second portion had a way more punch to it. So when doing a single note riff like I was doing on the track, if it's the only guitar that's recorded, it can sound rather thin. So having that effect as well, just to kind of back you up and give you a bit more width, if that makes any sense, really plays a major part in having great punch and improve the overall feel, I guess, of the riff, if that makes any sense. So yeah, so that's pretty much the last example that I wanted to give for today. So yeah, the octave, the pitch-based effect section in Catalyst is really full of really cool stuff. which I think a lot of you could find useful, and it's definitely worth checking out and exploring, and just you'll be able to get a plethora of sounds. The polyphonic pitch shift here can also act as a pitch shifter if you didn't know. So let me just switch here to Catalyst Edit. That'll pretty much be the last thing we'll be covering today, but it's really cool. So if it's set to 100% mix instead of 50, like I had set for the octaver kind of effect, and then you choose a different interval, then it'll down tune your whole guitar, right? So if you go to 0, it'll be whichever tuning the guitar's in, so standard in my case. And if you go -1, Z flat. If you go -5, you'll be in B. Right? So you can do it, up to, well, down to -1 octave and up to +1. +1 can kind of give you a 12 string-ish effect. If you set your mix value to a lower setting, you just play some stuff here, but the only thing I would say about tuning your guitar up like I just did is that it's a bit more sensitive to digital artifacts rather than tuning down. Both apply, well, always within reason. If you tune down to -12 and put 100% mix, it'll get wobbly as well. But yeah, just when you're using that effect in really low or really high values, just dial in the mix and maybe in a different way so you don't get as many digital artifacts. But in a pinch, you can get kind of an almost 12 stringy kind of effect from that pitch shifter here. So yeah, that'll pretty much be it for today. I'll give everyone a few seconds if we had any more questions. There was Duke saying there's a lot of cool stuff to try out. Well, thank you for being here, Duke. I hope you'll find at least some of this information useful, and I hope you'll find some new cool things to play with the octave effects. And saying ACDH was saying great job, thank you. Well, thanks for being part of the stream as well. It's always cool to have people ask him questions during the stream. It makes it so much more so interactive. So yeah, that'll be it for today. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.